This series contains adult language and descriptions of graphic violence. Listener discretion is advised. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Death by Southwest. This is episode 101. And I'm not going to start off talking about the mouth sounds, just a little bit. I've had several comments since I pleaded with you guys to please let me know specifically what these supposed mouth sounds are. And several people said, I don't know what those comments are talking about, so just ignore it. And you know what? I think that's good advice, and I'm going to do just that. So moving along. Today, we have an episode that does not take place in the Southwest. And I know that that's kind of the point of the show, but also it's my show. I can do kind of what I want with it. And I can't stop thinking about this case, basically. And I really wanted to share it. So when I come across a case that really captivates me, I just want to tell you guys about it. And so this is one of them. I was watching some true crime documentary on Hulu. I fell asleep. And when I woke up, it had ended and a new one had come on. And it was about this case that I'm going to tell you today. And I was kind of like half asleep, not really paying attention. And then very quickly I was drawn in. And I think I was so captivated by this case because for the first maybe 60% that I watched, I was convinced 100% that the person who's been accused of the crime absolutely did not do it and was wrongly convicted. And then all of a sudden, I wasn't so sure. And then I was sure that they didn't, and then I wasn't sure. And I still am not sure. So I want to share it because I found it quite interesting. And I would really, 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 I know I say this every episode, but I really would love to hear your opinions after you listen. So please, please, please leave comments on Spotify, send me an email, text, voicemail. I would love to hear your opinions. Honestly, I would really love to talk about this with someone. So we'll talk through the comments. And with that, let me tell you briefly a little teaser about this episode. So, in July 2015, a beloved and seemingly healthy chiropractor suddenly fell ill and within 24 hours was dead. At first, doctors were stumped, but as strange details began to emerge, the case took a chilling turn, and what started as a medical mystery soon unraveled into something far more disturbing. The story takes place in Whitesboro, New York. So I'm not going to do a big sense of place, but just to give you an idea of where we're talking about, Whitesboro is actually considered a village. They have a village government. It's located in Oneida County, New York, within the town of Whitestown. It's about 1 square mile. The population is around 3,500 people, 3,600 in 2020, so maybe a little bit more than that. It is a very, very predominantly white place, 87% white. Median household income is 47,000, and nearby cities. So Utica is about 4 miles to the east. Rome is 15 miles northwest. Syracuse is 50 miles west. And New York City is about 245 miles away northwest. Whitesboro is 245 miles northwest of New York City, so about a 4.5 hour drive. So that is Whitesboro. So we are going to jump in and get to know some of the main people in our story today. And one of those people is Mary Yoder. So Mary Louise Bakert Yoder was the kind of person that people instantly felt comfortable around. She was born March 18th, 1955 in Buffalo, New York. And she grew up in a really big, loud, very loving household. She was one of 8 children. She had 5 sisters and 2 brothers. Her brothers were Thomas and Arthur. And her sisters are Sharon, Sally, Janine, Kathleen and Patricia. And she fell somewhere in the middle in terms of age. From a very early age, family was very important to Mary. That's kind of how she grew up. That was the environment that her parents created. And she was very close with her parents and her siblings. Those who knew her said that she had a very calming, compassionate presence. From a young age, people told her that she was going to take care of other people. Like it was in her nature to be a caregiver. She was warm. She was generous. She had this way of making people around her just feel a little bit better. She sounds so lovely, doesn't she? I wish that people would say that about me. I know we always have great descriptions of people. Generally, victims are described very lovingly after they're gone, rightfully so. Um, and I always think, what are people going to say about me when I'm gone? That's such a selfish thing to think when I'm talking about someone else's demise. So let's move past that real quick. After high school, Mary went to college, and that's where she met Bill Yoder. She was studying to become a chiropractor, and so was he. They couldn't have been more different outside of that, though. They may have been studying the same thing, but Mary was very outgoing, extroverted. She was always on the go, on the move. And Bill was much more quiet, a more kind of analytical brain, more reserved. But they had a lot of chemistry. So this was a situation where opposites really did attract. They fell in love and they were eventually married. Together, they started a family. First came Leona, their first daughter, then Tamarin. And then 8 years later, they kind of had an oops baby, Adam, their only son. So the Yoders were very much a tight knit family, very similar to the one that Mary had grown up in. And after both working for about 20 years in chiropractic care, Mary and Bill, they decided, well, let's go all in on this chiropractic thing together. And they opened their own practice called Chiropractic Family Care right in Whitesboro, New York. It wasn't just a clinic. I mean, it was, but it was a family business. I mean, obviously both Mary and Bill were there, and Mary poured everything into that office. It was a place she really wanted it to feel, and it did feel like a place of healing. It felt more like a cozy home than a doctor's office. It wasn't sterile like many doctor's offices are. I mean, it was probably sterile in the sense of things were clean. I just mean the aesthetic wasn't sterile. So Mary, like I said, poured everything into this. She put so much time, energy, and love. And this for her was never about the money. She really, really wanted to help people, so much so that if people came to her and were in pain or needed her help or services and they couldn't afford it, she would barter with them. She would find a way to trade services. So she famously had a patient who had chickens, and Mary would say, "Bring me eggs, and we'll consider that payment." Or a baker who was great at baking bread, so she would say, "Bring me some baked bread, and that's your payment." She really, really cared for her patients, and her patients cared about her. They really loved her. It often felt much stronger than a typical doctor-patient relationship. So outside of work, Mary was very adventurous. She was very active. She did triathlons. She loved exercising. She loved doing anything outdoors that was active. She also really loved trying new things, trying new hobbies. She learned to belly dance when she was in her 60s. She was very health conscious, very, very health conscious, constantly drinking protein shakes. She was taking many supplements. And like I said, very dedicated to staying active and fit. And if you look at any pictures of her, which I will share, she is a very fit woman. So even though she had many interests, many hobbies, like I said, her real passion, her real love was her patients and her clinic. And the clinic honestly was like a second home. I mean, it was a family business, but it became a second home, not just for Mary's patients, but also for Mary and her family. You could often find her kids there, especially Adam, who, as he got older, began working on and off at the clinic. And in 2011, Adam met a girl named Caitlin Conley, who went by Katie, so that's what we're going to call her. From the very beginning, Adam's entire family loved Katie. Mary especially. She just thought that Katie had a really fun personality. She was very dedicated to everything that she did. And we're going to learn a little bit more about Katie in a second. And Mary really respected people who had a good work ethic or who were dedicated to whatever they chose to focus on in their life. And Katie was very much so that. And so it wasn't surprising that it didn't take long before Katie was offered a job at the clinic. She started as a receptionist and then she was quickly promoted to office manager. Now, Katie and Adam's relationship, it wasn't as strong as Katie's work ethic. It was very on again, off again. From the outside, they definitely looked like a typical young couple, just kind of figuring it out, trying to smooth out the bumps in the road. But behind the scenes, it was a lot more complicated than that. And we will get to that a bit later in this episode. But like I said, it was on again, off again. And you might think that that would affect the work environment for Katie. I mean, these are Adam's parents. If her and Adam are breaking up, getting back together, breaking up, you never know. But no matter what was going on with Katie and Adam's relationship, Katie and Mary, Adam's mother, remained incredibly close. Mary really held on to the hope that one day Katie would become her daughter-in-law. But she also felt like even if Katie and Adam didn't work it out, didn't make it work, the bond between her and Katie would always be there. It felt really unbreakable. Katie did feel almost like a daughter to Mary. And Katie loved Mary. She looked up to her. She admired her kindness, her generosity, her strength, and her dedication to her, both her career and her outside interests outside of her career. So who is Katie Conley? Katie was known for being bright, ambitious, and very compassionate. She grew up in Sauquoit, New York. She was one of 7 daughters in a big, loving family. Her father was a retired Army major, and Katie was raised with very strong values: discipline, hard work, respect, and kindness above all else. People who knew her said that she had a witty, friendly, outgoing personality. She could kind of light up a room. She was supportive and strong and always willing to help out the people around her. She was also a huge animal lover. And over the years, she rescued countless animals: horses, chickens, goats, a donkey, stray cats, and she gave all of them a loving home. Her family, well, I thought I had it in here, but her family lived on, had some property, had some farmland. So she was able to rescue those animals. She wasn't keeping horses in her backyard in the suburbs. But it wasn't unusual to find Katie outside for hours caring for her animals, no matter what the weather. And, New York weather is chilly in the winter, but she never let any of her animals go without constant care and love and attention. Katie also loved to travel. She had a real adventurous streak. She traveled to places like Ireland, Germany, the Bahamas, and Canada. And she really hoped to see the world one day before settling down and starting a family of her own. Katie was also quite driven. In high school, she was a competitive tennis player. She graduated in the top 10% of her class, and she went on to earn an associate's degree from Mohawk Valley Community College, followed by coursework at Utica College and Sunny Polytechnic. I don't know why I had so much trouble saying that. I apologize. She eventually graduated from Sunny Polytechnic Ooh, with a bachelor's in business in 2016. She finished her final semester with a 4.0 GPA and was invited into the National Honor Society both in high school and college. And while she was doing all of that, competitive tennis, getting multiple degrees, taking care of her animals, she was also working full-time at Chiropractic Family Care, where she managed scheduling, billing, and front desk operations as the office manager. And if that wasn't enough, after her time working at the chiropractic clinic, she would care for an elderly woman in the community, cooking, cleaning, shopping, and running errands for her. And she also ran her own small painting business on the side. So I'm not sure when Katie slept. She was very busy, obviously. And to everyone who knew her, to the outside world, she really She really came across and seemed like the total package. Like she just had it all together. She was smart, hardworking, generous, deeply rooted in her community. Everyone loved her. But as we know too well, things aren't always as they seem. By the summer of 2015, Mary's life was full of patients, full of people who adored her, full of hobbies and workouts and family dinners, and lots of love. She was 60 years old, but absolutely lived like someone half of her age. She was very healthy, very happy, and very busy. She was always doing, always giving as much as she could. At 60, she had no known illnesses, no underlying conditions, and absolutely no idea that something or someone was about to stop her life in its tracks. On Monday, July 20th, 2015, it started out just like any other day at Chiropractic Family Care. Katie was the first one in, like usual. As the office manager, she often opened up the clinic herself. She kind of got everything prepped and ready before Bill and Mary arrived. Not too long after Katie got there, Mary walked in. She was in her usual really good spirits, smiling, cheerful, happy, and she got straight to work seeing her morning patients. Everything was totally normal. Around lunchtime, Mary stepped out for a moment, which she often did because her mom, her elderly mother, lived nearby, and Mary would try to go by at least a couple times a week to check on her when she had a break from work. So after lunch, Mary came back to the clinic, like always, good mood, good spirits, ready to finish her day and see the rest of her patients. However, not long after returning, something changed. Mary started to get these terrible stomach cramps, and she was complaining about how much pain she was in. She was still seeing patients, but she was looking uncomfortable. Patients were noticing she didn't look well, that she looked like she was really in pain. And then came the actual getting sick, vomiting, diarrhea. It was so bad that she was having to leave the exam room when she was with patients, like mid appointment, run to the bathroom, and then finish seeing her patients. One patient even remembers that Mary left the room multiple times during a single visit, which was very, very unlike her. I mean, when she met with patients, she was very focused on them, and nothing would take her away from her patients. But she was ill. She was feeling really, really sick. And eventually it was just too much. So she canceled the rest of her appointments. She got in her car. She headed home. She figured it was a 24-hour bug or something, but on her way home, she called Bill and said, I'm coming home. I'm not feeling good. Love you. All of her voicemails that I heard in the documentary and in my research that she would leave for her husband, son, or daughters, they were also loving. She never forgot to say, I love you, which my mom did the same thing. So I really love that. You can't hear I love you too much. So, anyways, Mary, she was heading home. She figured it was a 24-hour bug. Maybe she picked something up from one of her patients. But as the night went on, her symptoms didn't improve. In fact, they got a lot worse. By the next morning, Tuesday, Mary was in really bad shape. And Bill was worried and didn't want to watch her suffer any longer. So he took her to the emergency room. At first, things looked promising. This was the right choice. Doctors gave her IV fluids. She seemed to perk up. They thought maybe it had just been like dehydration from all the vomiting and diarrhea, a stomach bug, something very simple. But then her body started to crash. And this time it was fast. She was very quickly transferred to the ICU. And even then, doctors couldn't figure out exactly what was going on with her. The next morning, Wednesday, July 22nd, Mary went into cardiac arrest. Doctors were able to revive her, but the worst wasn't over. She suffered a second heart attack, then a third, then a fourth. Throughout the day, Mary experienced a total of 8 heart attacks. Doctors called her children in. Leanna, Tamarin, and Adam rushed to the hospital. They were brought to the ICU and they were told to prepare for the worst. They also called Katie to be there because she was like family. She had been kind of like a daughter to Mary. And that evening, surrounded by Bill and her children, Mary went into cardiac arrest one final time. Doctors tried to resuscitate her. They did everything they could, but after the eighth heart attack, Mary could not be revived. At just 60 years old, Mary Yoder was gone. After Mary's sudden death, her family was left, obviously, incredibly devastated and incredibly confused. Mary was the healthiest person that anyone knew. She was active, she was vibrant, she had no health conditions. She ran a business, she worked out, she ate healthfully. There was seemingly no explanation for why a woman in her type of, good shape and health would have suddenly just essentially dropped dead. I mean, it was over the course of 2 to 3 days, but doctors had no explanation for this. So her body was sent for an autopsy, and the initial theory from the medical examiner, Dr. Robert Stopaker, was pretty straightforward. He assumed it must have been some type of aggressive infection, something that had rapidly attacked her system. But once he started the exam, things weren't really adding up. Once he opened Mary up, multiple organs showed signs of rapid cell death. The intestines, the heart, the kidneys. The ME found that Mary's organs were, quote unquote, fried. It was almost as if she had gone through severe chemotherapy. And that kind of widespread internal damage generally doesn't come from a virus or food poisoning. Your organs don't become fried from something like that. But it is something that you might expect to see in an actual poisoning. So the ME started running toxicology tests. He looked for common poisons, cyanide, arsenic. Everything came back negative. And toxicology isn't like an overnight or like a couple hours. I know sometimes on TV it's like, oh, we'll send this to the lab and then you get it back right away. Not the case. The first round of tests took over a month. And meanwhile, while they were waiting for these test results, while the ME was waiting for these test results, Mary was cremated, which meant there was no going back for additional testing. Like whatever the ME took in terms of blood, and he took several, but he also sent several off to be tested. So at this point, he only had one single vial of blood left, and that was it. He didn't want to waste it, and he didn't know what else to test for at this point. So he decided to call in some backup and some second opinions. So he sent the blood vial, all of Mary's medical records, and his own autopsy findings to a poison specialist for help. After going through everything, the specialist did find something. The specialist thought that the possible culprit of her ultimate demise could have been something called colchicine. Colchicine is a very common medication used to treat gout. Now, maybe all of you know what gout is. I've obviously heard of gout, but I couldn't have told you what it is if you asked me. So I looked it up. A form of inflammatory arthritis caused by the accumulation of uric acid crystals in the joints. Uric acid is a waste product produced when the body breaks down purines, which are found in certain foods like red meat, seafood, and alcohol. So apparently colchicine is the medication that is prescribed to treat gout. It can help prevent flare-ups. It can reduce inflammation when you're having an attack. I guess gout comes in kind of attacks. It used to be available both as an oral and an injectable, but they pulled the injectable from the US market because there were too many accidental poisonings. Why? Because the therapeutic dose and the lethal dose are very similar. In other words, it's an easy medication to overdose on unintentionally. So they used the final vial of blood to test for colchicine. Remember, the second opinion, the poison specialist thought colchicine could be the culprit, but he didn't know for sure. And I mean, that's a risk that you're taking because you only have this one vial of blood. But they did decide to test for colchicine with the final vial of blood. And when the results came back, they were shocking. Mary's blood had over 15 times the lethal amount of colchicine. They tested her stomach contents, and it was there as well. Not just traces of it, large amounts of it. This was not an unintentional poisoning. This was intentional. Aside from the fact that Mary was never prescribed colchicine, ever. She didn't have gout. She had never been prescribed this medication. So there's no way that she would have accidentally taken too much of it, which meant this was murder. So investigators immediately start digging. They tested everything in Mary's home, her medications, her supplements, her protein powders, anything that she might have ingested. But a lot of supplements aren't FDA regulated. And learning about this made me a little nervous because in the past 6 months, I've become like Mary in that I'm taking lots of supplements every single night. And I get them from Amazon, and I'm certain they are not FDA regulated. So, you know, you hope companies are doing the right thing, but you never totally know. It's completely possible that when you order supplements from Amazon, sure, from anywhere online that's not FDA approved or coming from a doctor, that it could be contaminated, that it could be absolutely not at all what you think you're ordering. And I had to stop myself from going down that road because it was freaking me out. But after all of this extensive testing, everything that Mary had been taking, all of her supplements, her powders, her proteins, it was all clean. There was no colchicine found in any of the products that she was taking regularly. Because what they were thinking is that maybe she ordered a supplement that the company, like the factory, an accident had happened and it had been, laced with too much colchicine by accident. But that wasn't the case. So now they knew for sure someone had given this to Mary. Someone had poisoned Mary. And where are we going to begin with the investigation? We all know that they are going to begin by looking at the husband. Now, Bill and Mary had been married for over 40 years. And, on paper, he had every reason to be super, super devastated. His wife of 40 years, his partner in life and in career, the mother of his children, died. And now he's finding out was killed. Mary's sisters felt like something was off with Bill, though. He didn't seem as devastated as they thought he should, which is tough because, as we know, grief is not linear. Grief comes, you guys have watched me grieve Izzy's death on here. And that was almost 2 years ago, and I still get weepy about it. So I'm going to move on quickly from that. But, grief, and she was a dog, a special dog, but a dog. My mom's death, that was years ago. And the grief still comes up at unexpected times. So anybody who's lost somebody, a pet, a friend, a family member, knows that grief affects everyone differently, and everyone grieves very differently. I don't know why I'm preaching this. Everyone knows this. But Bill just didn't seem sad. He just didn't seem to be grieving in any kind of way that you would expect a man who just lost like the love of his life of 40 years to be grieving. And then there was the fact that he had her, that was his choice to have her cremated way too quickly. Like, she was cremated before they even had a cause of death. Her sister said that he felt cold, detached, and they were vocal about it. They went to the investigators and said that they wanted Bill to be investigated. When they spoke to detectives, 3 of Mary's sisters, Sharon, Sally, and Janine, they told detectives some things that Mary had confided in them over the years. They said that at one point, Bill had asked Mary for an open marriage. And she didn't go for that. But then she had suspicions of infidelity. Bill took frequent solo weekend getaways, and he wouldn't let her come along. He would just say he needed time alone. He said, "You're extroverted, I'm not, and I need to take these weekend trips alone by myself to recharge." I don't know about you guys, but personally, I don't think that I would be okay if Mark said to me frequently, like, I don't know how frequently, but let's say once every 2 months or once every month, that he's taking an entire weekend to go away on his own. I cannot come. I don't know where he's going. Like, that's not happening. And I fully believe that he would not, that would be weird if I wanted to do that as well. Now, maybe that is okay for some people, but that still wasn't the weirdest thing. The biggest red flag for Mary's sisters and many people who followed this case was that 2 months after Mary's death, Bill was in a new relationship. Again, people grieve differently. And sometimes getting into another relationship when you lose somebody is the best way to cope with it. Bill didn't get into a relationship with just anybody. Bill got into a relationship with Mary's older sister, Kathy. Mary had introduced them almost 40 years ago. They'd known each other almost as long as Mary and Bill had been together. And Mary's other sisters, Sharon, Sally, and Janine, they were convinced that this relationship didn't actually start after Mary died, that Bill and Kathy had started an affair well before Mary died. And maybe he wanted Mary out of the picture. Needless to say, investigators were suspicious and they were anxious to talk more extensively to Bill. Despite all of this suspicion on Bill, though, Bill was very, very cooperative. He turned over his computer, his phone, his medical records, his DNA, anything that they asked for, he gave them full access. His attitude was kind of, go ahead, I have nothing to hide. Like, take whatever you want from my home, go through any of my stuff, no problem. And even though he was very cooperative, the whispers around town at this point of possible motives for Bill to have done this are getting louder and louder. But soon, investigators would discover something that would shift the entire case in a completely new direction. And someone else, much closer than anyone had expected, would come under the spotlight. By late 2015, several months had passed since Mary Yoder's death. Investigators still hadn't made any arrests, but they were watching, they were waiting, they were combing through possible leads. And then, seemingly out of nowhere, two identical anonymous letters show up. One was sent to the medical examiner's office and the other to the Oneida County Sheriff's Office. And these letters didn't have vague tips or information about Mary's death. They were incredibly specific. A quote from the letter said, "If the toxin found in her was colchicine, Adam Yoder, her son, is responsible. He told me he did it. He told me how and where he put the rest of the toxin." The letter went on to say that Adam had confessed, told this anonymous person that he was angry at Mary, that he felt she had failed him, and that he expected to gain financially after her death. It even claimed that Adam had put the poison into one of her vitamins during a visit to his parents' house. And then it gave one final detail. The leftover colchicine would be found under the passenger seat of Adam Yoder's Jeep. Now remember, at this point, this has not been released to the public. So the public has no idea that Mary died from colchicine poisoning. As far as the community, which is, remember, a small community, knows, she got sick unexpectedly, an unexplained illness, and passed. So investigators are like, okay, who could this be? Because the public doesn't know about this. Only a very small group of people know about this, and that's the family. So obviously they call Adam in for questioning on December 9th, 2015, and they talk to him for several hours. Eventually, they mention the anonymous letter. They tell him about it, and they're doing this because they want to see his reaction. According to the investigators who were in the room, they said that Adam looked genuinely stunned. He denied everything, said there's absolutely no truth to any of it. And then he said, I drove my Jeep here. If you want to check it, go ahead. So the investigators say, okay, great, thanks. And them and Adam walk outside to the parking lot. Adam is standing there beside his Jeep, smoking a cigarette, seems perfectly calm. He doesn't look nervous. And then they open the door, the Jeep doors, and the car is filthy, by the way. I'm not judging because my car is like my junk drawer. There's always water bottles and paper towels and stuff all over. And his had, old food bags and bottles of water. It was filthy. It looked like a little bit of a dumpster in there. And so they start kind of combing through, pulling out all the trash and junk, and they look under the seat. And under the passenger seat, just like it said in the letter, there is a brown bag, and inside of it, there is a bottle labeled colchicine, exactly as the letter said. Investigators said that Adam looked completely floored, like totally shocked. His cigarette almost fell out of his mouth. He was confused, clearly. And so even they found the colchicine, but they, as a good investigation or good investigators, they wanted to keep going through the Jeep. So they're pulling out more trash, receipts, junk. And then they found something else buried in all of the clutter. And it was a crumpled up receipt from the colchicine purchase. And the order on the receipt was linked to the email address Mr. Adam Yoder 1990 at Gmail. Investigators, Adam is standing right there. So they turn to him, are asking him, they go back inside. They're like, dude. And he's like, this is not my email. I didn't create this email. I've never used this email. I've never even seen this email. He says, someone is trying to frame me. Someone planted the poison, sent the letter, made the whole thing look like I did it, and I didn't do this. And honestly, investigators, they don't necessarily not believe him. I don't know why I said that way. They kind of believe him. Like he's so shocked and surprised that they almost feel like, shit, maybe somebody is trying to frame this kid. Adam is very cooperative. He offers his DNA, his phone records, anything they need. He says, you guys can have it. He even tells them that when his mom got sick, he wasn't even in town. He had gone to visit one of his sisters in another state 5 days before Mary got sick, and he was still there when she was hospitalized. He was 300 miles away. It was a pretty solid alibi. Plus, they did find it odd that if Adam did this, why would he keep the colchicine in his car for 4 months, just like hidden under the seat with a bunch of fast food wrappers around? That seems really foolish. Even for a inexperienced criminal or someone without a ton of intelligence. And I'm not saying either of those things about Adam. I'm saying somebody who would do this probably wouldn't leave the murder weapon in their car for months and months. Now, other people might argue he could have just forgotten about it. He was, traumatized by what he did. He panicked. He threw it in his car. And with all the junk and crap that he had in his car, just kind of got buried under stuff. And then he forgot it was there. Okay, that's feasible as well. Both options are feasible. But the shock and awe on his face, unless he's a great actor, they really kind of believed him. So they started thinking, well, if somebody was going to plant evidence and frame him, who would do that? And who would do that who knew about the colchicine, which again is it's Mary's family and like her immediate family and her extended family with her sisters and stuff. And that's it. And Katie Conley, Adam's on again, off again girlfriend and Mary's former office manager. So they bring Katie in for questioning. And at first, Katie's very helpful. She says Mary seemed totally normal the day she got sick. She was happy. She was upbeat right until she came back from lunch. And Katie said she didn't recall Mary eating or drinking anything, maybe a protein shake, but nothing unusual. Then they start asking Katie questions about Adam, and Katie starts painting a very different picture of Adam than what they had seen, at least from talking to him. She said that Adam had changed recently, that him and Mary had fought a lot and often, that Mary had been financially supporting Adam, and when she finally cut him off, Adam was furious. Detectives are sitting here listening to Katie, watching her, and they're thinking some of what she's saying is just lining up too closely with the letter, with that anonymous letter. So they say, fuck it. We're just going to ask her directly. And they ask her, did you write an anonymous letter and send it to us and the medical examiner? And at first she says, no, no. She looks uncomfortable. She kind of deflects a little bit, but they keep pushing her. And she finally admits, yes, I wrote the letter. This is huge. Detectives are like blown away because the police believed since they got this letter that whoever wrote the letter obviously has inside knowledge of this case that no one else could have known. And that really makes whoever wrote this letter kind of the prime suspect. So Katie very quickly went from being a witness, a helpful witness, to the detective's prime suspect in Mary's murder. So once Katie kind of realizes that the detectives aren't talking to her anymore like a witness or like someone who's just there to help, that they're talking to her like she's a suspect, her demeanor kind of changes. She starts explaining that she was really scared of Adam, that he had threatened to frame her. She told detectives that he was very controlling, he was very smart, and that he was dangerous, and she was afraid of him. One of the interviews, because there were many interviews at this point, one of the interviews, the detective said, so why do you think he kept the colchicine for so long? And Katie shrugged. This is the weirdest. Well, it's the first weirdest thing here. So let me just interject and say that at this point in the documentary, I know no one asked, but I'm going to share it. I am convinced it's Adam. Katie didn't do this. Absolutely no, there is not a doubt in my mind. She didn't do it. I like this girl. I believe her. And then you see footage from this interview, which I will try to find and share with you guys, where they ask her, why do you think he kept the colchicine for so long? And she kind of shrugs and she says, guys don't poison people. They say that's a lady's weapon. And she says it in this, like, it's just, first of all, it's a weird thing to say. It's not really a response to that question. And if she's trying to, like, if she did do this and she's trying to convince them that she didn't or that Adam did, that's not a really bright thing to say. Like, you don't want to draw attention to the fact that women usually use poison and men don't. So it's an odd thing to say, period. And then the way she says it, she kind of smirks. It's very odd. And it was very odd to the investigators. They were kind of freaked out, actually. So she's the prime suspect now. They are continuing to investigate because they don't have enough. The fact that she wrote the letter isn't enough to arrest her. And so they start looking into digital evidence because unfortunately Mary has been cremated, so there's no more physical evidence there. They didn't find anything else in Adam's Jeep. They didn't find anything in Mary's supplements or protein powders or in her home. So they're looking at digital evidence. And so they start kind of examining the email that was used to purchase the colchicine. Remember, Mr. Adam Yoder, 1990? Well, that was only ever accessed from Katie's devices, apparently. Her phone, her work computer, and her home computer. They found no evidence that on any of Adam's devices that he ever logged in or used that email address. They also found Katie's DNA on the cardboard sleeve that the colchicine bottle came in. And the prepaid credit card that was used to purchase the colchicine Well, Katie had admitted to buying those prepaid credit cards in an earlier interview. I don't know why or the context, but she admitted to it. Not that she used them to buy colchicine. She just admitted that, yes, I did buy those prepaid credit cards. So now Katie is really painfully aware that she is not only a suspect, but the suspect. And she starts to spiral a little bit. She begins crying. She's rocking back and forth. And she starts repeating over and over again, my life is over. I'm going to jail forever. Repeating it over. My life is over. My life is over. I'm going to jail forever. And I don't know. I mean, I've never been accused or a suspect in a crime, certainly not one like this. So I don't know, but to me that seems like a very odd thing to say for someone who is, claiming to be innocent. So investigators ask her, "Why'd you do this?" And she just keeps saying, "I would never risk my life for this. This is my whole life. I would never risk my life for this. My life is over." The interview honestly becomes, I mean, it's dramatic for sure. It's almost like it's veering on theatrical. At one point, she kind of bends over, she puts her head between her knees, and she's like trying to throw up into a garbage can. The investigator moves the garbage can over towards her, and she's kind of trying to, it seems like she is throwing up, but watching it, it seems like she's kind of faking it a little bit, trying to throw up, but she's not. It's like she's trying to like feign a panic attack. And to the investigators, along with anyone else who has seen that footage, including myself, it felt performative. It felt staged. And like I said, up until this point, I am dead set that this girl did not do it. Like she is innocent. But here's where it starts to turn for me a little bit. For the investigators too, because based on the digital evidence, the DNA evidence, and her own confession about the anonymous letter, police finally have enough. And Caitlin Conley is arrested for second-degree murder in the death of Mary Yoder. And this news shocks this community. Katie was loved by Mary and by the whole family. She worked side by side with Mary for a long time, and she was even there at the hospital the night that Mary died. She was, again, like a daughter to Mary. And now she was being charged with killing her. Katie's family, of course, immediately came to her defense. But what was actually surprising to a lot of people is that Mary's family came to her defense. Mary's sisters didn't believe that Katie did it. They actually believed that Adam and Bill were behind Mary's death and that they were framing Katie. Which, what? I mean, that's their nephew, their brother-in-law. So I think I don't even need to explain how fractured the relationship was between Mary's sisters and their nephew and brother-in-law, Bill and Adam, after Mary's death, because the fact that they thought that their own family, Mary's own immediate family, had killed her kind of says it all. So after Katie's arrest, she is released on bail and placed on house arrest at her parents' home while awaiting trial. The trial began in 2017, but there was a big twist, kind of a shock before the trial even began. And that was that Bill and Adam Yoder were granted blanket immunity before Katie's trial. I couldn't find exactly why they were granted this, like what evidence or what testimony did they provide in exchange for this. But a lot of people were unhappy about it. Because when I hear blanket immunity, I think, so they're safe. Like even if they actually did this and we find out that Katie didn't, they can't be tried for this because they have immunity, which actually is not true. According to the district attorney, he says, quote, "If Bill or Adam lied on the stand or if evidence later proves that they were involved, the immunity becomes void because they'd be guilty of perjury." So the prosecution builds a case against Katie that is almost entirely circumstantial, but it's still kind of compelling. So here's what they had. The email account that was used to order the colchicine, the Mr. Adam Yoder 1990 at Gmail, it had only been accessed from Katie's devices, and that is seemingly damning. The DNA on the cardboard sleeve of the colchicine, Katie's. The prepaid credit cards that were used to purchase the colchicine, Katie admitted to buying them. And although the colchicine was purchased under the name Adam Yoder, Adam had never accessed that email address from any of his devices. And the woman who took the order, the colchicine order on the phone, she said she spoke to a young, soft-spoken female. Katie was very soft-spoken. And the only other female, really, well, in my head, I think, well, all of the sisters. But legally, the only other female that was brought up was Mary. And Mary was not soft-spoken. So the prosecution really focused on the fact that the only female that could have ordered this that was soft-spoken was Katie. And finally, the timeline. Mary got sick around lunchtime. Bill wasn't at work that day. Adam was out of the state. And Katie was really the only one in the office who was there when Mary supposedly, or what they thought, ingested the colchicine. Again, at this point, no one knows how that colchicine got into Mary's body. They don't know what it was put in, how it was given to her, if it was given to her at lunch that day, if it was given to her the night before, the morning before. There's no definitive conclusion on this. So, okay, let's say all that evidence is correct, accurate. What's the motive? Prosecutors argued that Katie was heartbroken over her relationship with Adam and that she wanted to get back at him, and that eliminating Mary, who Katie maybe saw like as a threat or a roadblock, that would bring Adam back into her life. Weirdly, it kind of worked, because after Mary died, Adam really leaned on Katie for support. And even though they had been broken up, they got close once again. I don't know if they were actually dating, but they were close. Now, what did the defense do? So Katie's team argued that the evidence wasn't as solid as it seems. She was the office manager, so of course her DNA is on the boxes and packages, which makes complete sense to me. They said that Bill, as a co-owner of the chiropractic office, he also had access to the computers. Adam, as her ex, also had access to her phone and laptop, or had access at one point. They argued that anyone could have used her devices to access, to create, to access, to use that email account. Plus, electronic footprints can be altered. They can be manipulated. You can make it look like someone else was the person using this email address, even if it wasn't that person. Like, if you have some computer knowledge, if you are somewhat technologically savvy, it's not as difficult as one might think. So the defense is trying to redirect suspicion towards Bill. They say he has a motive, a real motive. Because the motive that the prosecution gives about Katie, while it did kind of like, it was true in the sense that Adam and Katie did get close after Mary died, it doesn't make sense that that is her motive for killing Mary. She didn't want to get back together with Adam. That she made that very clear to investigators and to Adam. So that motive was very shaky. But the defense pointing the finger at Bill, Mary's husband, and his motive, to me, this makes a lot of sense. The affair, alleged affair with Mary's sister, Kathy, maybe they wanted Mary out of the picture, and a supposed $400,000 life insurance payout, and the chiropractic business. He would get all of that. There were some sources that kind of disputed that amount of insurance money, and some even disputed that there was even a policy at all. That seems like something that would be easy enough to fact check, but I could not find any 100% confirmation on that. The defense also claimed that Bill could have poisoned Mary at home. He could have added the colchicine to a supplement, to a protein shake, and then later removed any evidence of it in the home. And some even suggest that Mary may have been poisoned twice, once at home and then again when she was in the hospital, and more on that in a minute. So while Mary was in the ICU, Bill went home to grab some things. He brought back her inhaler and cough drops, even though he was told to not bring anything into her room that was not approved by the hospital. Because remember, they don't know at this point when Mary's alive and she's in the hospital, they don't know why she's sick. They're trying to figure it out. So nobody can introduce anything into her room, her environment at all. But Bill did. And after she died, the ME requested those items for testing, the cough drops, the inhaler. Bill claimed he had no idea where it went. It was such a commotion after she died. He was in a blur. He doesn't know where those things ended up. And again, to this day, no one knows if the colchicine was given to Mary in a protein shake, a pill, a supplement, an inhaler, a cough drop. They never found the delivery method. After 3 weeks of testimony and 5 days of deliberation, the jury couldn't agree. It was a hung jury, and the judge declared a mistrial. Don't worry, that's not the end of the story. That is the end of the story for tonight, because there is easily another full hour of this case where it gets, if you've enjoyed this, just wait. Please, I beg of you, do not look this case up. Don't look it up. Don't go watch the documentary yet. If this is the first time that you're hearing it and you're actually enjoying it, just wait, please, until next week, because it's good. I think it's good. And in the meantime, I will post some video footage and images of Mary, Katie, Adam, everyone involved, and I'll try and find some of those interview clips because it is very telling. So that is it for today. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you are excited to hear the rest of it. And that's it. I'm going to stop talking because I'll probably give too much away if I keep blabbing on here. So thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this, if you enjoyed the show, if you're a fan, if you are not a fan, if you don't like the show, please go leave a comment on Apple. It really helps the podcast with other people finding the podcast. So good, bad, indifferent, leave your comments. I do read them and I try to take them into consideration. Sometimes they give me a complex, but please keep leaving them. And on Spotify as well, you can leave comments on Spotify, and I respond to the comments on Spotify. So thank you for listening. Love you guys. And I want to say this will be next week's episode. I don't want to get you excited that it will come out earlier. I'm so excited to finish telling this story. So I don't know. Stay tuned. Maybe it'll come. Maybe I'll put the second part out before next week. At the very latest, it will be next Tuesday. Okay. Thanks for listening, guys. Bye.
Death by Southwest is hosted by Jenna Schneider and Margot Carmichael.
Executive produced by Margot Carmichael.
Produced by Jenna Schneider.
Audio editing and sound design by Margot Carmichael.
Music by Soundstripe.
And a special thanks to Edward R. Murrow for letting us borrow his famous sign-off phrase, "Good night and good luck."